Chapter 6. Meeting of Revelations. It was the Monday of the second week when Kaylen, and just Kaylen, had been invited by Trian to dinner. I had asked if I could join them, but Trian insisted that I could not. It was strange. Trian took every opportunity to spend time with me that he could. But this rebuttal was so blunt and decisive that it took me by surprise. I almost wondered if he was going to chastise Kaylen for spending so much time with Orzamar's princess, and putting me in a compromising position by staying at my home for the duration of the visit. I have to admit that it hurt that Trian didn't want me at dinner, but the reason quickly became clear. Not long after Kaylen had left, a human messenger came by the house asking if King Maric and Tyrn Loghain could come to supper this evening. I, of course, agreed to have them over, and the messenger let me know that they would be there around 6 that evening. Needless to say, the house was a whirlwind of activity. Kayla made sure that the house was kept spotless, but you would think that it was a trash heap from the way she was barking at the servants to get everything in order. Dinner was going to be a simple shepherd's pie, but now Kala was ordering whole chickens, lamb, and pigs to be readied. Thankfully, I was able to convince her down to some chickens and vegetables. It was only 3 people after all. As for me, I spent the next few hours with Farron trying to figure out what I should try to talk to Maric and Loghain about. I was going to insist that Farron be in the room with us as my guard, so that he could listen in and maybe remind me about things I'd forgotten to ask. There were so many things we could tell them. Try to influence events in the future, or just completely avoid certain things altogether. We couldn't avoid the blight. Maric and Loghain had already been to Ortantaig and unintentionally set those events in motion. Now, all we could do was prepare for the blight and take advantage of the thinning number of dark spawn in the deep roads when it happened. I'd been thinking about the blight since I came to Thedas and what the dwarves could do during the blight. We had 2 options, technically 3, but which one we would take would be up to more than just me. Time seemed to fly by when Maric and Loghain arrived. I might have hurt one of the servants' feelings by yelling at them not to open the door, that I would do it. Yes, I was still very much fangirling over the fact that I got to meet with these legendary lore characters. I apologized to the servant, then composed myself, put on that very stupid smile I was sure I'd been wearing every time I got to speak with them, then opened the door. "King Maric, Tyrn Loghain," I said, with as welcoming and cheerful a tone as I could muster. "Welcome back to..." I stopped when I was staring at a teenage human girl with long blonde hair and sporting a House Kuzlan brooch on her blouse, behind whom was standing King Maric, Tyrn Loghain, and an awkward-looking boy around my age with short hair and looking like he wanted to laugh. My confusion was palpable before something clicked. Looking up at the girl, I offered a little smirk. "Alyssa?" Alyssa was the default name for the human noble character from the game for the female human noble. "Serena, actually," she corrected. "Serena Kuzland." She gave me a polite curtsy. I didn't default. I was right. I should have known, though. I'd completely ignored all the banners and symbology in the retinue on the day of King Maris's arrival. I was too excited at the prospect of meeting Maric, Loghain, and Kaylen. Did that mean that the boy with them was... I returned the curtsy. "Lady Kuzland, it is an absolute pleasure to finally meet you. I am Paragon Merida Oradum, daughter or King and Queen Idukan of Orzamar. Please, won't you all come in? I'll have some extra food prepared. We only expected 2 guests." King Maric entered first, and the others filed in behind him. "Don't go to too much trouble. We're not here to eat you out of house and home. I told you we should have been forthright with who we would be bringing to begin with, Maric," Loghain chastised his king. "Paragon Orodum has been treating your son, and us, with all due care since we've arrived. The least we could have done is tell her how many people were coming to dinner. I'll make it up to her tonight, I'm sure," Maric reassured Loghain as I led them to the dining room. I nearly cried out in thanks when we entered the dining room and Kayla smiled at me. The table was set with everything she'd wanted to have cooked earlier. That woman looked out for me in so many different ways that I'm not sure what I would have done without her. I mouthed a silent, "Thank you," to her, to which she simply bowed her head in response. The boy laughed when he saw all the food. "You must not have much experience with humans, Paragon Oradum. This is enough food for a banquet. I've seen Loghain eat, and I'll admit that even he wouldn't be able to gobble all of this down." Alistair may jest, but it does seem like you overprepared for us, Maric said with a laugh. Or you somehow caught wind of how many people we were bringing and were simply being polite at the door. I knew it. It was Alistair. Well, I said, and I motioned for everyone to take their seats. We wanted to make sure no one went without something they might like. I took my place at the head of the table. King Maric sat to my right, Loghain to my left. Alistair sat beside Maric, while Serena sat beside Loghain. It would seem introductions aren't exactly needed, King Maric began, but formalities are formalities. This is my son, Alistair. Alistair nodded to me. A pleasure, my lady. I smiled and bowed my head. The pleasure is all mine, Alistair. Maric was claiming Alistair, yet he didn't present Alistair to my family when they first arrived. This had to mean that Maric didn't claim him as a legitimate heir yet? Was he protecting Kaelin and Anora's succession? Or perhaps he was waiting to announce Alistair's legitimacy later on? And this is Lady Serena Cousland, who is currently Tyrn Loghain's ward, Maric continued. I looked to Serena, who bowed her head. Paragon Oradum, a pleasure. I responded in kind. Lady Cousland, you have no idea how happy I am to have you here. And why is that exactly? Loghain asked with a hint of suspicion in his voice. As far as I know, the two of you haven't met until just now. The question wasn't one I was prepared to answer, but luckily for me, Serena was. She's one of the 6, Tyrn Loghain, Serena stated matter-of-factly. Paragon Oradum is like me. We were each born with knowledge of the world beyond what we should know. We're fated. The description Serena gave hit me hard. And how do you know that? Loghain asked. You've only just met. Because Oradum is a dwarven word meaning obligation, fate, or something unavoidable, I responded. I took the name when becoming a paragon because I felt an obligation to use my prior knowledge to help my people. I saw it as my fate. Is that so? King Maric asked between bites of his chicken. Then perhaps you can tell us what might happen in the next 10 years? The 5th blight, I said bluntly, seriously, with no hint of hesitation. And it will happen because you and Tyrn Loghain went into the Ortantig and accidentally led the Darkspawn to the imprisoned old god, Urthamiel. That's not exactly how it went, Maric responded as he looked at Loghain, the memory of the events seeming to flood back to him. But it's a close enough synopsis, I said, reading the tone correctly. The blight will happen in 10 years. We can't stop it because we don't know where Urthamiel is right now. But we can lure the Darkspawn to where we want them. And how would you propose we do that? Loghain asked. I know how, I said, smirking to try to ease the tension in the room. It's rather easy if I'm behind honest with you, but for that information, I'd like something in return. You would withhold such information from the king? Alistair asked in shock. Begging your pardon, Alistair, I said with a smile. But he's not my king. How dare you? Loghain snapped and slammed a fist on the table. Now, Loghain, Maric said as he held up a hand to calm Loghain down. She's right, after all. I'm not her king and hold no authority here. I'm simply a house guest who happens to be a king in another kingdom. Forgive me, your grace, I said softly. But I am a paragon. By all rights, I outrank my father, and even as one of the fated, my concern is for my people first. And we are constantly dealing with Darkspawn. We don't have the luxury of waiting for a blight. So asking for something in return for the information on how to lure them to where you need them seems like I'm getting the short end of the stick. She's not wrong, your grace, Serena said. If it weren't for the Darkspawn, the dwarves would be much stronger allies. If we can help them in any way before the blight to ensure we have their aid when the time comes, it would be a worthwhile investment. And how is it that she has this key bit of information and you do not? Loghain asked, a sharp hint of irritation in his voice. If you are both fated, then shouldn't you know what she knows? Not necessarily, Serena said calmly, unfazed by Loghain's tone. She'd clearly gotten used to him. We were all born with knowledge beyond what we should know, but that doesn't mean we all have the same knowledge. We know about the blight, the events that should be surrounding it, and about things that will happen after it. But what we know about the rest of the world or past events will be different, whether that's because of where we were born, who we were born to, who's to say? Serena conveniently left out that what we would know would be dependent on how much of the lore we knew about the franchise before we were reborn here. It suddenly occurred to me that Farron and I hadn't actually had a good lore dump since we met each other. We really hadn't even discussed our lives prior to coming to Thetis. The only time we did was when we were comparing notes on my plans. I really needed to correct that. She's right, Loghain, Maric sighed. And it's not like we haven't already made concessions in this matter. That explains that, I chuckled. What's that? Maric asked. His tone suggested that he wasn't just curious, but he was testing me somehow. The concessions you mentioned, I replied, sitting up a bit taller. You have Alistair with you, and Lady Cousland is Tyrn Loghain's ward. If I were to guess, Lady Cousland has convinced her father to let her travel with you and Tyrn Loghain to collect, or meet with, the other fated. In return, Loghain has promised to safeguard Lady Cousland during the journey, and you have promised Alistair's hand in marriage to Lady Cousland. The table sat silent for several moments. Was I right? I asked with a bright smile. It's as if you were there when it all happened, Maric said, clearly impressed. How did you know? I couldn't help but laugh. It's what I would have done. Tyrn Loghain is a trusted and loyal man who puts the safety of Ferelden above all else. He would gladly take on the responsibility of someone who has the knowledge to save the country. And Alistair has Thyrin blood and will make a fine husband for the second most powerful family in your country. A small price to pay to get Lady Cousland's help and secure an alliance with the Couslands. Taking a few moments to consider everything else, I looked to Serena. Did you take the Arling as well? I'm working on that, Serena said with a smirk. Arl Howe is a snake, and I won't allow him to become a threat to my family. When there's proof, Loghain said, clearly not wanting that subject to go any further if his tone had anything to say about it. Indeed, Maric agreed, and I think that's proof enough that she is indeed one of the fated. So the question becomes, what do you want in return for the information on how to lure the Darkspawn? I sat back in my chair in as dignified and professional manner as possible. I want the same dedication of assistance for the Blight for myself and my people after the Blight has been dealt with, and I want detailed directions to Ortan Taig. Maric and Loghain exchanged looks with each other. Why do you want to know how to get there? Because that's where this all began, Loghain asked. I shook my head. Not at all. We can't change what's already happened. But my goal is to help my people retake as many of the lost Taigs as possible once the Darkspawn are dealt with. But before we help you, I want to retake Ortan Taig. It has great value to my people? Serena looked almost horrified. You don't plan to use the anvil, do you? The anvil was made for a good purpose, but the corrupted nobles at the time corrupted its purpose, I said with a calm explanation. It was supposed to be used by volunteers. But it wasn't, Serena protested. They even used it on Caradin. I know, I responded calmly. But I also know that the golems should have been able to keep their minds. Caradin and Shale are both examples of dwarves who remained sentient after the process. I imagine this was the intention all along. My plan is to find Caradin and ask him for his help. By subjecting more of your people into becoming golems? Serena nearly screamed. In helping the dwarves rid Thetis of the Darkspawn and hunting down the remaining old gods, I said firmly. I turned my gaze to Maric. Your Grace, I know how to lure the Darkspawn to where you need them to be, and I know how to hunt down every remaining old god and kill it before it can become an archdemon, which will each start a blight of their own. The room went dead silent. Even Serena couldn't believe what I was saying. This effort will require the sacrifice of more dwarves than I care to imagine. It will be the work of years. We will have to dedicate the whole of our society to doing this, and each step will require that we clear out the deep roads throughout the process. But I know the numbers, and I know we can do it. All I'm asking from you and yours is to help us with the first few steps after we've helped you lure the Darkspawn and stop the Blight. There. My aspirations were out for this group to know. I plan to stop the Darkspawn and handle the rising of the old gods. So, the golems, Serena almost whispered, will be a last resort, I nodded. Dwarves who are mortally wounded will have the option to become golems only if we can figure out how to let them keep their minds. We will give them the opportunity to continue fighting for their families, their houses, for all of Thedas. So, you want the help of our armies after the Blight? Maric asked. To do what? You mentioned the first few steps. By all accounts, there are anywhere between 20 to 30,000 Darkspawn at any given time, I began. They're scattered all throughout the deep roads. During a Blight, about 75% of them will be a part of the Horde, give or take. 20% are left to harass my people here and in Kalsharok. The other 5% are spread out through the deep roads, or raiding on the surface. What I want from you is to bring your forces to Orzammar, after we've dealt with the Blight and bolster our numbers for 2 years, as we not only retake the closest lost Thaigs, but secure the connecting deep roads to them as well. You're asking for 2 years' worth of commitment for a few moments' worth of advice? Maric asked. Now that is a bit much, regardless of how helpful the advice is. To say the very least, Loghain added. It's too much. I'm not asking you to do anything more or less than what I'm willing to do, I replied confidently. In return for you giving 2 years of your life to my people, House Oradum will dedicate 2 years to helping your people before the Blight. How so? Serena asked. She seemed genuinely intrigued now. I gave her a smile. House Oradum boasts the most skilled and dedicated craftsmen and artisans in all of Orzammar, and I am deeply loved by my people. So, in just under 8 years, I will bring the entirety of my house to Ostagar. I'll likely come with a great deal more dwarves as well. We will bring materials and all of our skills to reinforce the fort in preparation against the Darkspawn and lend our warriors to the fight. That is certainly a worthy contribution to these efforts, Maric said as he looked at Loghain, his brow rising as if to ask if his friend agreed. I should say so, Loghain conceded. Years and manpower for years and manpower, Alistair chimed in. Looks like we're in for a fun decade in the next few years. There's also one more thing I'd like, I added. But it's a deal I need to make with Serena. Is she able to give you something I can't? Maric asked with no small amount of doubt. She can't give this to me, but you can, I replied diplomatically. However, I would like her to make an agreement with me since I won't be able to leave Orzammar for the next few years. So? Serena asked. What do you want? Callian, or Darien, if their name were defaulted, I smirked. The city elf? Indeed, I nodded. Have them sent to me, and you can grab the mage and the Dalish elf. We'll keep the 6 of us in 2 different groups to ensure our safety. 3 here in Orzammar, 3 with you, King Maric and Tyrn Loghain. Wait, does this mean you already knew there were others like us? Serena gasped. I couldn't help but laugh and then look to my right, waving for Farron to join us. Meet Farron Oradum, I said with a smile. Farron is the dwarf commoner. I met him when I was 2, and he had already started improving the life of his family. He's now one of my personal guards. Farron, please introduce yourself. Farron, dressed to the nines in the fine plate armor of House Oradum, bowed to the guests and removed his helmet. Your Grace, Tyrn Loghain, Lady Serena, Alistair. Hey, Alistair protested at being left last in the greeting. I am Farron Oradum, of House Oradum, Farron continued without a pause. It would seem that I am one of the fated, as you call them. Lady Merida has spoken truthfully with you. She wants nothing more than to work together to stop the Blight, retake our lost Thaigs, and end the threat of the Darkspawn for good. We've worked together for the past 7 years to get our people to where we are now. If there is anyone in this world that you can rely on to combat the Blight, it's her. How old are you, Lady Merida? Maric asked. I'm 10, I replied with a smile. Farron is 12. 10 years old? Loghain repeated. And you've burdened yourself with such responsibilities since you were 3? Earlier, I said. Since before I was 1. But I could only start to act on my plans when I was 3. I had to grow a bit first, learn to read and write our language, and walk, of course. How sad, Alistair sighed. You've never allowed yourself a childhood? My childhood is a small price to pay to save my people, and the people of Thedas, I responded. Though their pity for me did sink in a bit. I'd had a chance to live life from the beginning again, to enjoy my youth. I looked up at my guests and smiled, unsure if I had completely hidden any regret I might have felt. You know what they say? Youth is wasted on the young. I did not intend for this to be true of myself. Nor did I, Farron added. Nor did any of us, Serena added. We were all born at this time to help save Ferelden from the Blight. And now I know that we were also born to help end the Blights once and for all. Lady Merida has the right of it. Maric and Loghain shared an expression of concession and respect between them before Maric smiled at me. Very well, Lady Merida. In 7 years, we'll meet you and yours at Ostagar. And once we've dealt with the Blight, we'll help your people secure your lost Thags. And the elf? I asked. I will not force this elf to come here, Maric hesitated, but I will have Lady Serena explain. If this elf agrees, they'll arrive within the next few months after our visit is over. Thank you, Your Grace. I bowed my head to Maric. Looking back to Serena, I arched a brow. Have you already collected the mage or the Dalish elf? She shook her head. Not yet. Tyrn Loghain believed it was prudent to get the dwarves on board to help against the Blight before the mages, since the mages are obligated to help one way or another. And it would seem like I was correct in my insistence. Loghain crossed his arms, rather proud of his intuition. As you always are, Maric chuckled. Would you do me a favor after you've stopped at the circle to collect the mage? I asked Serena. What's that? Send word back to me if the mage is an elf or a human, I said thoughtfully. Well, on that note, I was wondering if you remembered the default names, Serena replied with a bit of embarrassment. I smiled and nodded. I'm willing to bet that the mage will be a human, a member of the Amel family. Either Dalen Amel or Salona Amel. If it's an elf, their default name will be either Alim or Neria. And in case you need the Dalish name, it will be Theron or Lina. Thank you, Serena bowed her head. I couldn't remember, but I knew the middle child of the Idukan family would be one of us. It was another reason I agreed to come to Orzammar first. I am always happy to be of service, I said with a bright smile. We spent the next few hours speaking about plans for the Blight and how we could use the Six Fated to our best advantage. We went over how we could prepare over the next few years. I managed to finagle a few sparring and training sessions, because how amazing would it be for Farron and I to be able to learn from two of the greatest warriors of the age. At the end of the night, I presented King Maric and Tyrn Loghain with the rings I'd had House Oradum craft for them. The rest of the week went as planned and was largely uneventful. Trian had come by the day after my dinner meeting and apologized for the way he snubbed me, apologized and brought me a literal cartload of gifts. He also asked if Narav was expected to stop by today. Was love in the air? True. Narav was a few years away from being named an adult, but noble plans were always long-term. And Trian did always insist on keeping ties between House Edukan and House Ahelmi close in his journal entries. Farron and I were able to spar and learn from both King Maric and Tyrn Loghain. They were so far beyond our current abilities that it was almost disheartening for me. Farron seemed to take it as a challenge. I wish I had his enthusiasm, but I think my mindset towards physical combat had changed a bit with everything that I was learning. It still amazed me how skilled your average warrior was compared to the people who studied medieval combat in my original life. They were so lost compared to what the reality was. The rest of the week was filled with meetings, planning, and consolidating it all into a solid timeline. We informed Father of my intent to aid the humans with rebuilding Ostagar, but we didn't share the reason why quite yet. I was going to handle that announcement myself. When King Maric took his leave, the dwarves of Orzammar had done a great amount of trade, and were out in droves to wish them all well. As for myself and House Oradum, we had some work ahead of us.